Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Taylor, and I'd like to welcome to you today from the Language of Light podcast. I have with me today a special guest, Mr. Donald E. Scoggins, who is the Vice President and co-founder of the Frederick Douglass Housing Corporation. He has a plethora of experiences and accomplishments throughout his life. I am so honored this day to introduce to you all. Some of you may already know him through some of the accomplishments that he's had. Some of you are going to get to know him. And those of you that get to know him are going to remember him because he has so much information. I am so honored that he is on our Language of Life podcast today to just share just a little bit with us. We're going to have him back many times, but I enjoy talking with him. Every time I talk with him, I always learn something that I did not know, I didn't realize was right under my nose. And so today, I want to introduce to you all Mr. Don Scoggins, who is a great man. And you'll hear many stories that we're going to talk about today and just share with you. He and I live in the same county in Northern Virginia, which is good. He's got the southern end, I got the western end, and we're both holding it down. But I'm excited about what he's going to share with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, those who are watching, Mr. Donald E. Scoggins. Hello, Mr. Scoggins. Thank you for
Hello to you. Thank you very much, Paul, for having me on.
All right. And we're going to get right into it. I want you all to really take notes and just listen to the history. And this is a learning experience that is going to take place with you. Those of you that are in the local area, in the Northern Virginia area, I want you to begin to look up his information and things that he's going to share. But we're going to keep it real with you all. This is going to be some directions. He is a Hampton graduate. Those of you alphas out there, there he is. He's here with us. And so I'm honored. We know some of the same people. It's unique how we met, Mr. Scoggins. It's unique how we met. Of course, when we were talking on the telephone and he started to share with me some of the things that he was doing. And of course, the connections where I work at. We're able to really make some connections there for him. We just started to talk, and our friendship began to grow right off the bat. So today, I'm going to ask just a series of questions to Mr. Scoggins that he can share with us. But the thing, Mr. Scoggins, I wanted to start with how you and I were talking about some of the things in reference to the things that you've done as far as in the 60s, and of course, with your grandfather. And things that you shared with me about him. And then as we move forward, some of the things in which God has laid on your heart and what you've been able to do over the years to make it possible for men like myself and things that you were very instrumental in to make it happen. But yet your passion is still strong and you're so involved now in so many ways. There's a plethora of things that you've done in so many ways. And again, like I said, whenever I talk to you, I'm always encouraged to know that there's so much more work to do, but to have men like yourself there to kind of give us even direction now with some of your insight and some of your experiences. But where I wanted to start was where we really begin to gel with talking about your granddad and the impact he made on your life, and then how that influenced you throughout your life to be where you are today. If we can start there with your granddad and your grandmother and the early, 30s, 40s, and the accomplishments that they had. If we can start there, sir, as you introduce yourself. Floor is yours.
Yes. Maybe I will begin by talking about maybe the late 40s. That's when I probably most kind of remember things, even though I was born a little bit before that. I would say that when in the late 40s, when we used to visit my granddad, who was president of the Virginia Union at the time, what I would remember is that big tower, the big building on the post, not on the post, but on the campus. It's called the Belgian Building. It was named after John Vann, who was the publisher of Pittsburgh Courier newspaper in Pittsburgh. He was a black fella, and he was very instrumental in helping to raise money to build the facility. That facility was at the U.S. World's Fair, and I think in the late 30s. And because of the war, they could not send the pavilion back to Belgium. So the Belgian government had a process where they were trying to forge better relationships with in those days we were called Negroes. They were trying to forge great relations or better relations with the Negro community. So it was indicated that they would like to donate the building to a historically Black college. So Virginia Union was the one that was selected. At the time, Virginia Union, and still is one of the great institutions that train Black ministers. Just about everyone, I'm sure just about most Black ministers, if you mention Virginia Union, even though it's a small school in Richmond, they are familiar with the campus, familiar with the school. So when they were building the property, and since my background was in architecture and in urban planning, I remember asking my granddad way back, I asked him how did they get it down to Virginia Union, because they had to raise $500,000 to bring it, to transport it from New York City down to Richmond. And he told me what they had to go through to get to raise the money. And he was, even though that was during the segregated days, he said there were a lot of kind white people that helped them raise the money. And by him saying that kind of set a tone to me that even though segregation, race, I would say racism exists, it's not universal with all white people. I want people to know that what's bad or what we consider a horror in our community doesn't exist throughout everybody's heart, And he told me that he would go to some of the Black churches in the countrysides. He would drive all day, he would drive and go there, and he would be there all day, and he would preach and everything. And then at the end of the service, the minister would say, all right, let's give a contribution to Virginia Union, what they were trying to do. And he said he would be there all day sometime, and he'd be lucky if he had got $50, That was back in the time. And I said, and then that was multiple times he did that. He said that even though he knew that he couldn't depend on Black churches for the money, but he wanted them to be involved some way. He said whether they put anything or not, just the idea that he would go to these places and speak about what they were trying to do, he thought that was very important. And he grew up in Northern Neck, Virginia. He started around 14 years old. I think he was field hand or whatever he was doing, but he only got, I think, $7 a month at that time. So that was, and so he would share with me how challenging it was to work with our people, because he was saying that Blacks are very, I wouldn't use the word disorganized, but we have so many distractions towards us that we're really not as together as we should be. And he would tell me about the woes of trying to raise money to build to have the Belden building. And I had Granddad, I said, Granddad, how did you handle it? What did you do? Because he was talking about how challenging it was to deal with colored folks. Back in those days, they used the word colored and Negro, but he said how challenging it was to work with our people. And I said, well, Granddad, how did you do it? What did you, how did you get through it? And then he had a great pause, and he said, despite whatever, you just have to plow ahead. You just can't give up,
That's the important thing right there.
Yeah. He said, you can't give up. You may take a little rest and everything, a respite, but don't give up. Just go back into the battle and just continue on, because he lived to be 90 years old, and he told me that many of his students, when they would come to visit the school at campus, because when he retired, shortly after he retired, he built a little house across from Virginia Union, and he said so many of his students would come to him and visit him at the house. He was like up in his 80s. He lived to be 90, but he was up in his 80s, and he said that he got more joy out of hearing what his students were doing and how valuable, at least how much he meant to their lives. He said that was more important than any money or anything else. He said that when you get older in life, when you look back and see how you've touched people, That's more important than anything.
Wow. Wow. That is awesome.
And I've never forgotten that, because right now I'm involved with certain projects and I get very exasperated at times because I tend to be kind of on the impatient side, and a lot of our people, they seem to, there's a lot of bureaucracy, internal bureaucracy involved in doing anything. I'm not even talking about dealing with white people. I'm talking about within our own selves. We go through a lot of processes to do this, that, and the other. There are too many spoons in a soup, so to speak. You get, and sometimes things don't work out because people drop by the wayside waiting on whatever to take place. And I tend to be impatient in that regard. And I heard that my grandfather was impatient too. So I guess that's a good trait,
Yeah, let me ask you about that. That is so important. That's why, even having you here today, because the impatience, what I see it as, you don't have time to waste time, on things that are not productive and people that are not producing. And so you're able to forge on and plow forward. And one of the things that my objective today, and even at this juncture where we are, with having over the years seen what has taken place since your granddad, and of course yourself pursuing education, as your granddad was a model for you, in so many areas of where it helped motivate you, I'm sure, in those challenging moments, and I'm sure those conversations that you've had. But there's something that you share with me, even in the season and where you're at right now with the accomplishments and the things that you've had over the years and what you've been able to do now, is that your voice, your experience is so detrimental to what and how we move forward in this day and time and where we need to go and how the mantle needs to be passed on. But that's the question I wanted to ask you about the mantle. What advice would you be able to give at this day and time to my generation, and of course the generation after me, that's coming after me, that we can continuously maintenance the vision and preserve the accomplishments? Because the school that you're talking about, that your granddad was there, my sister got an MDiv from there. And so many people are still being influenced by the Jeremiah Wright. I mean, so many people, I could name off names. You could name off more names than me, of how that school and the work that your granddad did and the sacrifice that both he and your mom made in order for you to be able to do what you're doing. And then for us in this generation to be able to accomplish what we're doing. What advice would you give now to those persons that are in political leadership, that are in, corporate leadership, that are in that are pursuing different types of goals and aspirations? What advice would you give along with carrying that mantle of maintaining it to where you can exhale? You can exhale at the same time. What advice would you give?
I would say is the most succinct advice I can give, regardless of their age, but particularly to young people, is to find someone that you can emulate. Find somebody that you would like to model your life after as much as possible, with I would say, with an adjustment for the times. Find someone who accomplished things back in their day that you could use as a model, or you could use as inspiration to carry you forward to what you have to deal with in your day or in our day. And I would say another person, in addition to my granddad, someone who's even came before him, and this is someone that everyone knows, and that's Freddie Douglass. Freddie Douglass was born a slave. He hardly knew his father, and if anyone reads the life of Freddie Douglass and what he was able to accomplish, you just kind of close your eyes and just try to imagine what it was like hundreds of years ago, what he accomplished in his time, and use it as an inspiration of what you want to accomplish. Now, one of the things that I would say also is have a strategic plan for your life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when at an early age, try to establish a goal in what you would like to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you do something, think about that goal or how you're going to accomplish it. When you have a strategic plan, that will guide you towards certain decisions you make. Many of our young people, unfortunately, are aimless, they're wayward, they have no direction because they don't have a goal. If you have a goal, you would think about, I can't do this because of that. If I do this, that's going to interfere with my goal. If I do that, it's going to interfere with my goal. Even if you don't accomplish the goal, at least try to have a goal.
That's awesome.
And I would also say this, and this is very important to our community particularly, and that is the loudest voices aren't always the best voices. There are people out in our community, and I really hate to say this, but and I would give them the benefit of the doubt of saying that maybe they don't know that, but exploiting our foibles or our ills for their own personal gain is not very helpful. And many times the persons who are the loudest voices, who gets the greatest crowd, and they're not necessarily the best voices to be heard. And
that's awesome. I'm writing that down. You said the loudest voices are not always the best
voices, right? And I think that what we need to do, and what I would like to do, I really love to read, and I like to read more than anything else. I like to read about people's lives, what people have accomplished. I'm not too much for a fiction reader, but I love to read, is this what I would call as realistic, And so if you read about what people have gone through and what they've been able to accomplish, and many people who've written books you probably never even heard of them before, but if you try to read up on somebody or try to see how they've done something, I think that's very, very influential and very impactful. And it really pains me to see the state of our community today. And we went back, I think before we started, we were talking about in the 60s of how things came. And I think, and I really don't want to feel like I'm maligning anybody, but I think it kind of started in the 60s when a lot of when politics and our religious communities, our religious institutions sort of mesh together. I think that we should have kept more of a separate. We shouldn't have. And many, and I hate, hate to say this too, but many ministers, they look at the green dollar, and that's more important than the word, than the Bible. And they would do what was good for them to build some massive edifices and everything. We went into being. I've always thought the ministers would be the final arbiter of any particular issue that we were dealing with, but in our community, we've gone from that to being popular. What's popular? You go to the churches and everything. I'm not much for hearing drums and banjo, all that type of, and jumping around and dancing, and it's almost like you're at a rock concert, and maybe that's popular to get the young people, but to me, I think we've lost something with that. We need to go back to the basics.
And see, that's one of the things where I was saying, like, maintenance the vision. Because like you said, I know you can relate to this. We're dealing with a cancel generation. We're a lot of our younger generations, they've moved to a place to where they're looking for truth. They're looking for things that are real and fake. They're looking for evidence. And the church is manifestation, but in the world, people that even come from the world to the church, they're looking for manifestation and looking for consistency. And they're looking for someone, like you said, not to have the loudest voice, but yet the person who can communicate to where they can articulate words that people can grasp hold of. the Bible, and the Bible says life and death is in the power of the tongue. What are you saying that's bringing life and moving people to a place to where we can change laws? And one of the things I was looking at, where I want to move to today's time, and from what you've done, the impact of your grandfather on your life, what you've been able to do to, you said you're into architecture and various things you're doing now, to where I was looking at when I introduced you earlier, where you're the vice president / you're the co-founder of the Frederick Douglass Housing Corporation. Because I know you mentioned Frederick Douglass's name, and before your granddad, and how the things that he's done that have impact generations, all up until now, will continuously impact generations. And it's unique how you have that name as the co-founder of the Frederick Douglass Housing Corporation. Now, when you were putting that together, and I can just hear you talking, and I can just see your mind working now, the creativity and the ability to be able to make a difference and start a business with that name, out of many things that you've done. But if you don't mind, if we can talk about that right now, how did that influence you to even use his name to be a part of the vice president and co-founder of the Frederick Douglass Housing Corporation? What motivated you for that?
Before I say that, I kind of like to indicate that of everything I've accomplished, sometimes I have to kind of think about it myself and sort of pinch myself, because, when you're doing things, you're not necessarily thinking about the accomplishment. You just want to get certain things done. But then after you lived a certain length of time, you look back and see certain things you've done. And I would say that the most important thing is to have a certain kind of mindset. You have to have a mindset for accomplishments. I mean, you can't have this popular type where everything goes kind of a attitude, or you don't have like I mentioned earlier, you have to have a strategic plan. Now, as far as the Frederick Douglass Housing Corporation, the reason why we got the name is because the 152-unit garden apartment complex exists on 5 acres behind the Frederick Douglass historic site in Anacostia, D.C. In 1900, the Frederick Douglass Memorial Historical Association was established by Frederick Douglass's widow, and she established it as she established it to be the recipient of the majestic. I don't know if anyone has seen the home, but it's a very majestic property in Anacostia, and she mortgaged the property to pay his children by his first wife, and with the proceeds for the mortgage of property, that's what she did with it. And she was in ill health herself, so she felt that she wanted to make sure that upon her demise, there was an organization that would be in place. Since she and Mr. Douglass didn't have children, they wanted to make sure there would be an organization in place that would be able to maintain the home and more importantly, pay off the mortgage that she had to place on the home. So she created the Frederick Douglass Memorial Historical Association that was chartered by Congress in 1900. Okay, and because of that, that's how we got the name, the Frederick Douglass Housing Corporation. Now, the buildings, the 152-unit garden apartment complex was built in the mid-50s behind the home. It was on 5 acres behind the home, and we thought that was a good moniker for that property. It's a kind of a long story how the association got involved, got the apartments, because there was some legal issues involved, and that's kind of like for another time. But that's how we selected the name, and it was the first 100% Section 8 property east of the Anacostia River in Washington, D.C. If anyone is familiar with east of the river, for a long time it was considered a forgotten area of the district, and this was one of the, back in the late 70s, early 80s, this was sort of like the first significant redevelopment or revitalization that took place in that area.
Now, Mr. Scoggins, with that and with what you're doing, I wanted to add, I thought about asking this earlier on, but I'm sure you probably have gotten this question several times. There may even be some information out there, but have you written a book, or are there books that you've written or are going to write?
I've never written a book, but I think I would like to write one day, maybe a autobiographical, something that, I'm not a writer. I love to read, but I'm not a writer, but I may like to put something down on paper, because I get so many people that ask me about that. Because one thing that I wanted to mention here that kind of ties into everything else is the fact that I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and my father was an electrical contractor in North Tulsa, which is a Black community.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was during the early 50s. And at the time, our communities were still very segregated. But I had a window into the Black entrepreneurship within the Black community. Back in the day, like right now, you hear people talk about the Black Wall Street, but we had many things that people are talking about trying to create today in our communities. We had at one time, they were very modest, but we had a relatively, when I say we, within the most major Black communities throughout the country, where you go to Chicago, Richmond, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, every place that there was a sizable Black population, it was segregated in their communities. There was a business community, whether it was one strip or whether it was 2 or 3 blocks. You had that, and we patronized each other. We were much more unified back then than we are today. And it was because of necessity we did that. But today, with these freedoms that we have, so to speak, I don't think we're utilizing those freedoms as we should have. I really don't. I think that we've forgotten where we came from, and we're trying to recreate something that we've already had. And if we had done things a little better way back when, I think we would be in a better shape today. But that experience of growing up in Tulsa, I think, is very important to what I've been able to do, because I witnessed what we can accomplish when you have the mind to do so.
I really think I want to be in the, as my dad used to say, the amen corner here, to really encourage you, sir, that I just really would love to see that. I think we need to work with the network to put together some scribes or some persons that could do some shadow writing or something to really document your life story and the things that you've done, because again, that's going to be one of the books that many people read afterwards too. And I think that when we document, I was thinking when I was listening to you talk, I was just thinking about that, looking at this, reviewing and reading the information that you gave to me to read, and of course me doing other research. The way that the access to information now through the internet, through technology, it's so many different ways in which we can access information, but educational information that's going to help us with us being able to be more balanced in our process and how we understand, like you were talking about, even in the earlier days, and how your grandfather was assisted by white people that helped him, even in slave times. There were folks that fought for us. I look at pictures, I look at different types of photographs, and I see white people marching with King and marching in the civil rights movement. I talk with people even nowadays and understanding that there was a conglomeration, although it may not have been highlighted. I just believe that in your book, it would bring about balance. Like you talked about mentors, having mentors, really understanding who's a coach and who's a mentor in your life. People are point of references to give us an understanding of how we should begin to move forward and recapture that spirit of entrepreneurship, and really begin to move forward. But now we see that America is more of a melting pot. It's a melting pot. And I mean, we've been able to accomplish a lot of things, but then there's yet so much more to accomplish. And I really do believe that the information that you have, the accomplishments that you've had, just in the short time, we're running out of time now, but I want to ask your permission. Can I have you to come back again?
Certainly will. I'll be glad to come back, but I would like to say one thing before before we sign off, and that is, I think that today, if we really want to improve our plight, so to speak, our where we are, I think that we need to give sufficient and more attention to restoring the Black family.
I'm writing that down now.
Family. I mean, the family is the foundation, and if you don't have a sufficient family structure or apparatus, then everything else is pretty much for naught. Of course, we're all individuals, and we have to use our own personal constitution within ourselves to achieve certain things. But I think that a lot of the information that we get in terms of growing up, we get at a very early age. Actually, you get it, you may not know it or not, but from the age of, I'll say 1 or 2 years old to maybe 3 or 4 years old, those are some of the most developed, those are some of the most important years of our life, because you're forming, that's where a lot of our development forms at those ages. We may not know that, but that's what happens. You take attitudes, the young kids some of them are surly, some of them are have certain kind of ways about them, but believe it or not, they were acquired ways early age. So I think it's very important to have people around you that are positive and forward thinking, and that encourages us to do better and to help other people. So that's basically.
I agree. I always say, I talk about the network. I talk about tunnel vision, and now I talk about peripheral vision. And as we close this out, and it sounds like, sir, that you have been influenced and you have peripheral vision. And tunnel vision is people that only see themselves, and if they have other folks that come around them, it's to help accomplish only what they want to accomplish. But peripheral vision is when you are aware of all the gifts, the talents, and the skill sets. And some folks will be with you maybe for a season to prepare for them to be able to extend. One of the things I put out on Facebook, talking about leadership. I'm so glad, because I love talking about leadership, and you are a leader, so that's why I let talk to you. But leadership should never end with you, but it should extend from you. That's the statement I put out on Facebook just this week. And I don't know, this restoring the Black family, I always said that the man is out of place, the wife is misplaced, and the children are displaced. Because if the man is not in his rightful place, then therefore a child, like you're saying, when they're coming up, there's learned behavior. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If they're not used to seeing the right type of, platform before them, they'll only act out based on what they know. And a lot of times, still, there are other men that could be surrogates. And one of the things that my dad was he was a strong man, he was a godly man, he was a leader of the family, and he and my mom, and, he raised all of us. But I also had my grandfather, Philip Allen, who, he didn't go to church, but he knew people. He understood people, and he would always say wise things. And, Mr. Scoggins, I would laugh at him, a lot of things he said, but today, I still remember things he said which were so true, because he had a good sense of how people were because of his life. And, he was born in 1904, and he lived a long time up until the 90s. He died in 1989. That's what it was. But he made such an impact on all of us, my brothers and sisters. We talk about him to this day, and so it's people like that. They're men, they're families, they're people that may have had a father in their home. But see, what I'm thinking about is that if we could put something together to provide something like a surrogate leadership for even families that are in broken homes, men that are now fathers, but never had a fatherly figure in their life, they're learning. And some of them have made mistakes, but then you have children. So we have to reverse that. And so with the right kind of leadership for the communities and local and abroad, and men like yourself and myself coming together, creating a network. And this is the point I wanted to make as we close. Your network determines your net worth. But if you connect with the wrong people, it devalues your net worth. I want to deal with that thing. And I believe that these conversations that you and I are having, and that we'll have many more, where your insight and the information is going to help us really remove a lot of the devaluing things that have messed with the valuing capabilities of our network, that we begin to remove the liabilities and make sure we latch on to the assets to make us more stronger as a people and integrated as a people, to where it's not all one color, but it's a rainbow. And it is moving beyond racism and moving to a place of where we're coming together. Anytime a politician can be bipartisan, why can't we as a people be that, in a sense, to where we're connecting, but still holding on to the moral values, and maintaining and preserving that as we begin to move forward and provide leadership. And I believe, Mr. Scoggins, with what you're saying now, you sent me a text. I was so honored that you sent it to me. You said, Paul, I think we're on to something.
Let me just say one thing. I would like one thing that's sort of, I would say something that kind of carries me on is that I look at everybody, and I guess I got this from my background in selling real estate. Mm-hmm. I look at everybody as having a value. Right. I don't care how humble the person is or whatever even a person in the street that may be considered homeless or, I look upon that person as having value, because in selling real estate, I found out that when you make contact with people, that person that you think may not be worth dealing with, they may be able to channel you to $1 million deal, selling something. They may know somebody that you don't know, and they could tell you about who may have a house, or they may have a whatever, or they may know somebody that's looking at buying, or somebody's looking to sell. Don't discount anybody, So that's how I approach until the person gives me a reason not to want to deal with them. I'm very open to dealing with anybody. I don't care who they are.
I like that. Everyone, and we want to end the show tonight or today or whatever time zone you're watching this with that statement. You heard it from Dolly Scoggins. Everyone has value. Everyone has value, and we're open to listen. And then through listening, you can process whether it is of value or if it's not. And then you can begin to move forward. And so with that, Mr. Scoggins, thank you.
Thank you for inviting
so much more. Can I say
if there's one that I had 2 or 3 to go also?
Yeah. All right. Well, then 2 and 3 is all the way. And you all going to hear more about this. And I'm hoping in 2 or 3 that part 2 and 3 we'll begin to talk about possibly, maybe I'm moving too quickly. You can slow me down, Mr. Scoggins, because I know you can be straightforward too. Maybe we can talk about that book.
Right. Yeah.
We'll see. Because I believe that in this, I don't know, maybe we can design a syllabus. To talk about strategy, to talk about, how to make a real estate deal, how to connect, how to network, and who the various persons to talk with, how to get the funding, various things like that. So much out there, what type of stockbrokers to connect with. All of these things are a lot of variables that we can use. But overall, I hope that you all have been encouraged. Those of you that are starting your careers, those of you that are architects, those of you that are in the business of real estate and other things, and you have desires, I hope that you would be able to be inspired by this podcast that is taking place, because it is the language of life. Now, today we've had a gentleman that has experienced a lot of things in life, and has made things happen. He didn't say it, but I know that through the years, he's made things possible for a lot of people to have homes, to live in neighborhoods, and to be successful, and to be able to accomplish their dreams and goals because of this one man's passion, although he was inspired by another man's passion. Through that passion has educated many, many of people in this country and neighboring neighborhoods that you even set in some of the churches and pews that they have been inspired by, and you didn't even know it. But I hope that you would come to know that now. So in my closing, I want to close with this statement that says, confidence propels competence. My father said this. He said, I may not know a lot, but what I know it to pieces. And so I want you to understand what it is you know, and I want you, like Mr. Scoggins said earlier, grandfather kept plowing the ground. I want you to keep plowing the ground, because the ground you plow, somebody's got seeds that need to be planted, and then those seeds that were planted need to be watered. And some of our foreparents have cried on those seeds, but it's those tears of love and of passion that we have now been able to be rooted and grounded, and now we're moving forward. Now it's the season for us to bring forth fruit in the areas of corporate America, and the areas of our communities, and the areas of other areas of which we can influence. This is what we want to bring. This is what this podcast is all about. So, Mr. Scoggins, thank you, sir, for your patience. And I celebrate you. I appreciate everything that you've done. And guess what? Our friendship is going to grow even more to where I may even be by your house for dinner one day. Don't invite myself, but that's not good house manners. But I just love to eat. I just put it out there. So anyway, we're looking forward to having a great conversation with you again. And those of you that are with us today, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Stay tuned. Be ready. I want you to look at this show, this podcast, with expectation, because Mr. Scoggins is he's going to give us information. He talked about mentors. He talked about coaching. He talked about strategic planning, goals, being focused. These are one of the things. He talked a little bit about Black Wall Street and the various things. Like, we're going to get into that too, talking about that and the things like that. So overall, I'm finished for the day. Mr. Scoggins, before we close, is there one word of wisdom, a nugget of wisdom you would give to those that are listening and watching this podcast before we go? Is there one thing that you want to say? And then we can pick up on it next time.
I would say one word of wisdom, and I wanted to get into it more at a later date when we have the other podcasts, is that look at your life I want each individual to look at themselves as having 3 lives, 3 parts to their life. The first part, from birth to 30 years old, you're preparing yourself, you're getting educated. Hopefully that you have a goal that you have established, or at least, you're thinking about. From 30 to 60 years old, you're accomplishing those goals. You're working very hard to make sure that you can realize those goals. And then from 60 to 90 and beyond, those are the years that you want to be giving back, helping others to achieve goals that they may have. Like you had goals at your early age, you want others to have goals. And this is what you do. You want to help other people to achieve their goals. So that's the word of wisdom.
Word of wisdom. You heard that from Mr. Donald E. Scoggins. Maybe that'll be in his book coming up. I don't know. Thank you all. And you all have an awesome day. And we'll see you next time. Bye now.
Okay.